By which we assign Secret Service protection to a candidate. As Donald Trump pointed out at this stage of the game, Barack Obama, then a senator, did have protection. Keep in mind, he also had a number of very credible and real threats to himself and his family. To former Secret Service agent Dan Bongino on what constitutes getting that protection. What does, Dan?
Neil, what happens here is the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, in conjunction with a committee comprised of House and Senate leadership members, they'll determine based on crowd size, funds raised, and poll numbers who should get it and who shouldn't. But you made a great point in the opening. President Obama had protection about 5 months prior, in February. We're already into November when he was a candidate with similar type crowd sizes. So if you are going to advocate for this, for candidates getting Secret Service protection, which I don't agree with, then Trump should have it too.
You know, you could always raise the issue, and I don't want to, give away the kind of stuff you guys are privy to when you assign that protection. But the understanding that I had at the time with Senator Obama is that there were a number of clear and very real death threats against him, and that they pounced on that because of that. Now, I don't know if the same applies to Mr. Trump this time or any of the candidates now, but we've learned in retrospect that all it takes is one guy, right? You think of how protection built up after Bobby Kennedy's assassination in 1968. Other candidates were afforded similar protection themselves. I fast forward to 1972, George Wallace, after his shooting at a Maryland outside mall, then they started saying, well, we got to protect all these guys. But why do we wait, God forbid, for something like that?
You know, Neil, the government's always going to be reactionary.
Sure.
They leverage crisis to expand their footprint, even if it isn't a thing that is seemingly bipartisan, like protection of presidential candidates. But the problem with that approach, Neil, is where does it end? I can tell you as a Secret Service agent, having been through 3 presidential campaigns, I see no logical reason based on the threat footprint that was around when President Obama was a candidate. I see no difference between that threat footprint and the one Senator Cruz has now, Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, or anyone else. I can tell you from firsthand experience, the threat profile to President Obama was not as bad as the media makes it out to be.
That's interesting. Then what constitutes it? I mean, do you go by crowds that are ultimately generated, that gets to be a security risk? They don't know how to handle those crowds? Just that security could be compromised because you have, like, throngs?
Well, this is why Donald Trump has a legitimate beef. Your question's perfect, because it's not written clearly, Neil. The law, Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 3056, is written that a major presidential candidate. What does that mean, Neil? Major doesn't mean anything. Major means what? Poll numbers, crowd sizes? That's why Trump, again, I don't think candidates should get it. They should have to pay for it themselves. But if the law's written that way, then why is Trump not a major candidate? He's certainly drawing the crowd.
No, that's interesting.
He certainly has the money.
You raised an interesting point, as you always do. I always learn a lot from you. That, let's say you could start out like Jimmy Carter, 1976, certainly not be on anyone's radar, and certainly not constitute being, a major candidate. And then he emerges as the ultimate nominee of the party. At what point, I don't even know the point in the campaign year that he got that protection, but do you get it when you look like you are a credible candidate with a real shot at becoming president?
You know what, my humble opinion here, also, Jimmy Carter, what about Bill Clinton, 1992? Remember, Gary Hart was going to be the nominee. He was the major candidate. Well, you get it, Neil. Honestly, when someone in power says, gosh, if this guy gets hurt, it's going to be really embarrassing. I mean, that's my humble opinion on how this is done, because it's such a discretionary decision to have to make.
So who gets it now? Who gets it now? Hillary Clinton, by virtue of the fact she's a former Secretary of State and a former senator. I don't even know. But
First Lady.
She gets it, First Lady. Okay, so she gets protection.
Yeah.
Do you know anyone else in the race who does automatically?
No. No, that's it. It's only Mrs. Clinton because of that designation as a former First Lady. The former Secretary of State, that's the purview of the Diplomatic Security Service, not the Secret Service. We'd have nothing to do with that. But as a former First Lady, and Neil, one more thing about this. Keep in mind, Secret Service protection runs about $100,000 a day up to $1 million a day on a foreign trip. That's essentially an in-kind donation to a campaign. That's a really big deal to have to pay for that. Mrs. Clinton's getting this for free. Government taxpayer, taxpayers paying for it.
That's wild. Dan, thank you very much. Always good having you on.
Very welcome, sir.
All right, well.